Hi, everyone. This is Jane Walker. I'm the Executive Director of FREDLA, and welcome, everybody. We see all these names from all over the country in the chat box. If you haven't introduced yourself, please do so. And if this is your first learning community call with us, we welcome you. Throughout the call, we encourage you to make comments and ask questions in the chat box. If you're driving in your car, please be safe and know that there will be handouts available to you at the end of the webinar, along with a link that will be sent out later about the recording for this webinar. So just focus on where you're going. At the end, also, please, we're asking that you stay on the line for just a minute or two and complete a very short survey about the Learning Community Call. It's a way for us and funders to get your feedback, which is very important for us. So this learning community is hosted by the Family Run Executive Director Leadership Association, aka FREDLA. We are a partner in the National Technical Assistance Network for Children's Behavioral Health that is operated and coordinated through the University of Maryland under a contract with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or as we know it, SAMHSA. Our learning community for family leaders is held 6 times a year. If you've joined us on previous calls, you know the rich information that is shared not only by the experts who have presented on our calls, but also the information that is shared among all of you who are participating on the call. We expect this learning community to be very interactive and encourage you to use the chat box to share your thoughts throughout the next 90 minutes. And yes, you can use exclamation marks or smiley faces or whatever to emphasize any point that you want to make. So just in case you're not familiar with FREDLA, let me give you a 10-second overview. FREDLA was started in 2013 by a group of executive directors of family-run organizations. And FREDLA is dedicated to building leadership and organizational capacity of family-run organizations. FREDLA's team is small but mighty, as all of our staff are family members with lived experience and have extensive background in starting and sustaining family-run organizations and developing programs, including peer support. We're available to you to provide technical assistance for any family-run organization on any topic. And if we don't have an answer, we'll try to get one for you. At the end, we'll provide our contact information so you can reach us if you would like to request technical assistance. Now, our topic for today is ethics, and boy, has that been in the news of late. Maybe you saw Mark Zuckerberg sweating the CEO of Facebook being questioned for 2 days by a congressional committee on what? On disclosure of our private information on Facebook without our knowledge. So these are all ethical dilemmas. Hopefully none of us have any dilemmas of the magnitude that Mark Zuckerberg is facing. But in our work with families every day and as peer support providers, we do encounter ethical dilemmas. Knowing this and knowing that parent peer support partners are often working on their own in the community and with families, FREDLA has been very attentive to this issue for the past 2 years. And it's for this reason that we are doing this learning community. And later on, we will also be sharing with you a new tool on ethics for parent peer support providers that FREDLA has developed in partnership with 14 family-run organizations. But before we dig in, let's do a quick poll. So those of you who are at your computers today, we have a couple of questions for you. So let us know, are you a parent peer support provider or a supervisor or the executive director of a family-run organization or a mental health provider or maybe it's none of the above, it's something else. If you could fill that in, just click on the little circle that best represents who you are on this call. And we know many of you wear multiple hats, but for the purpose of this call, let's see what we have. Well, interesting, we have about 40% parent peer support providers, 12% supervisors. We have a few executive directors, and interestingly, people with a no vote. That's a vote. All right, let's move on to the second question. So in your role, whatever that may be, have you ever faced an ethical dilemma? Yes or no? All right, it looks like it's overwhelmingly yes on this one. So you're at the right place. So lastly, if we could go to the next poll, in your role, was your ethical dilemma with a family you were working with, a colleague at work, or a colleague in the community, or all of the above, or no vote? Looks like all of the above might be the one most frequently experienced. So everybody has faced ethical dilemmas in multiple situations. So with that, we're going to talk more about ethical dilemmas in all three of those settings. And it's my pleasure to turn this over to Millie Sweeney, who is the Deputy Director of FREDLA, who will be providing an overview of ethics for parent peer support providers. Millie?
Thanks, Jane. Looks like we've got a great group on today. We are over 100 attendees at this point, which is exciting. So parent peer support has continued to expand as a valuable and critical service in children's mental health. While more PPS providers are being hired across settings and systems, there's still a lack of standardization and training in necessary competencies. And ethics is one area that is really challenging for this workforce, as they're called upon to use their personal lived experience and their personal story in a professional manner. Providing support as a professional is quite different than providing support as a friend or as a fellow parent. The dilemmas faced by parent peer support providers also differ from those encountered by adult peers or by clinicians. While there is a national code of ethics and a similar code of ethics developed by individual states, there's very little guidance about this critical aspect of parent peer support. As the workforce grows, it's imperative that in this area, as one of the core competencies for parent peer support providers, is addressed in training and in ongoing professional development. Most people become parent peer support providers based on the desire to help other families overcome the challenges that they themselves have encountered in trying to find resources and support for their own children and families. Because we identify so closely with what other families are experiencing, it's natural to want to step in and help. While this lived experience is what makes the peer support relationship unique and effective, it can also make it challenging to maintain that professional role. The relationship a parent peer support provider develops with families is the foundation for all the work they do together, and boundaries are a major factor in the quality and functionality of this relationship. There are guidelines established by legal, ethical, and professional standards. They exist to enable the parent peer support provider to work effectively with a family without becoming personally entangled in the family's dynamics or problems. Boundaries can be physical, emotional, intellectual, or spiritual. Boundaries allow a parent-peer support provider to define his or her role as well as the expectations that the parent-peer support provider has of the family and that the family may have of the parent-peer support provider. When boundaries are not established and upheld, the perception is that the relationship is meeting the personal needs of the parent-peer support provider rather than the needs of the family. When healthy boundaries are in place, the family's needs are prioritized, and both the parent-peer support provider and the family are clear on their responsibilities and the expectations they have of each other. Boundaries are established and maintained through ethical behavior. Now, ethics are, excuse me, it's a set of principles, rules, or standards for the conduct of a person or the members of a profession. For parent-peer support providers, ethics refers to how one conducts oneself when working with families, other professionals, and community stakeholders. Ethics serve to protect the family receiving services, the individual provider, and the provider's organization and the profession by setting a standard for behavior in the field. Violating ethics standards can lead to a variety of consequences, from reprimand to loss of certification or legal sanctions depending on the severity of the violation. Why is this important? The purpose of ethics is to guide the parent-peer support provider in her role, relationships, and responsibilities in both a personal and professional capacity. It assists the parent-peer support provider to maintain physical and emotional safety for both the provider and the family, to act as a role model in healthy family communication and collaborative professional relationships, to avoid the tendency to fall into the role of rescuer, to stay focused on parent-peer support responsibilities to the family, and the provision of appropriate services, maintaining the parent-peer support capacity as a helper. It also prevents compassion fatigue, which is commonly referred to as burnout. Foster a healthy, open, communicative environment when working in a team. Having a code of ethics assists parent-peer support providers in addressing situations and ethical dilemmas that they face in their professional role. We've all faced ethical dilemmas in our work, and I think we saw that in the poll earlier. An ethical dilemma is a situation where a person must decide between two or more courses of action. Taking either course of action may have consequences or violate rules, beliefs, convictions, or commonly accepted practice. Deciding upon the best and most appropriate outcome is the core of an ethical dilemma or situation. How you handle ethical dilemmas as a friend can be very different than how you might handle such dilemmas when you're a parent-peer support provider acting in a professional capacity. As a parent-peer support provider, you're responsible not only to yourself, but to the families you're serving, your agency, the licensing entity of your agency, and other system partners. For example, a parent-peer support provider giving their own money to a family in need may help the family short-term. However, personally giving money to a family may violate the organization's rules, may cross professional boundaries, and may not help the family in the long run. Weighing those choices is an ethical dilemma. And you can see from this chart how a personal decision can affect a relationship with a friend, but a parent-peer support provider decision affects many more people, the agency, collaborative partners, others. The decision could result in the result of a friendship if you're making a decision as a friend, but as a parent-peer support provider, it could mean so much more. Also, as a friend, for example, if you're lending money, that decision doesn't violate rules or laws. However, in a professional capacity, your decision may result in criminal or civil liability to you or your agency, will violate agency policies, and could result in disciplinary action for you. Ethical situations can be grouped into three main categories: working with families, interactions in the workplace, and working in the community and with partners. The workbook we're going to talk about in a little bit explores these three categories. including offering several scenarios for each to consider and to develop approaches for addressing in an ethical manner. Working ethically with families includes observing laws, rules, policies, and procedures in all your work with families, respecting the cultural values, choices, decisions, privacy, and beliefs of families, and refraining from imposing your own values and beliefs. To act honestly and respect the rights and responsibilities of parents for their children, and work to establish a collaborative relationship with families and partners. Setting clear, appropriate, and culturally sensitive boundaries of the provider and the family around expectations, responsibilities, time, access, decision-making, outcomes, and more. Abiding by organizational and professional code of conduct and policies in regard to responsibilities to families and youth is part of working ethically with families, as well as maintaining appropriate boundaries and avoiding sexual, romantic, or business relationships with any family member receiving services. Part of working ethically with families includes staying up to date on current resources, research, and tools to assist you in your work with families. Fostering relationships that include skill building and promoting the family's voice and goals is part of ethical conduct. In the workplace, conducting oneself ethically means to act honestly and with integrity to promote the mission of the organization, to know and adhere to the organization's policies and procedures, to treat coworkers with respect, and to maintain accurate documentation for services provided and the hours that you work. Maintaining confidentiality of information for families served and also internal communications of the organization during or subsequent to employment or contract with the organization is part of ethical conduct. Avoiding any perceived or real conflicts of interest with other employees, board members, contractors, or funders is part of conducting yourself ethically in the workplace, as well as taking measures to discourage or report unethical conduct of coworkers. Working ethically in the community and with partners, that third area of ethics that we're going to address, involves participating in and communicating to and contributing to decisions that affect the well-being of families and youth using family-driven and youth-guided principles and perspectives. It means acting professionally when representing the organization and profession outside the office and in your work with community members. It means to be clear with partners about your role and your support for family voice and empowerment, as well as acknowledging and respecting the perspectives of others and promoting authentic family voice and choice. It means promoting collaboration and partnerships that benefit families and maintaining the confidentiality of the families with whom you work. Treating partners with respect, courtesy, and fairness, and being transparent about your goals and support of families is part of being ethical. Finally, educating yourself on systems relevant to your work with families, including their roles, their mandates, and trends, is part of maintaining ethic conduct in this role. So let's start with working with families. In working with families, a peer-to-peer support provider will encounter unique and complex situations. Although every family is different, many needs might be the same. It's important to remember that your role is to work alongside families and support them in making the choices that are best for their child, their family, and themselves. So I'm going to review some basic guidelines for working with families in an ethical manner. Your role as a parent-peer support provider is a professional one. As such, if you disagree with the family's decision, it's important to respect their choice and never impose your belief system or morals on the family. Your role is to work within their belief system, not convert them to yours. With every interaction, it may be appropriate to share pieces of your personal story to build a trusting relationship. However, it's important to share your story only as it applies to supporting the family. The goal is to address their needs, not yours. For example, if your child experienced many hospitalizations and the family you're working with has a child in the hospital, you might share that you understand how much parents worry when their child is in the hospital because you've had that experience. Going into detail about how many hospitalizations your child has had where they were hospitalized and for how long takes the focus off the family whose child is presently in the hospital. Some of the situations in which you may find yourself can be difficult to navigate. When personal and professional conflicts arise, seek supervision or professional guidance. Sometimes just talking through a situation can clarify what actions you should take. It's important to be clear that your role as a parent peer support provider is different from a friendship or social relationship. Some major issues that commonly arise include relationships outside of work, accepting gifts, issues around money, or giving gifts. As far as relationships outside of work, maintaining professionalism by avoiding emotional or physical relationships, including social media with members of families who are enrolled in your program, are the best way to maintain your ethical standards. This includes social relationships, and it would not be appropriate to meet them for drinks after work or to use other substances with them. Many families will want to express their gratitude through gifts, as they would with a family member or friend. To avoid offending the family, seek guidance from your supervisor on what your organization's policy on accepting gifts is. Some organizations permit accepting items like homemade food, handmade gifts, or flowers, but do not permit expensive gifts or money. It's important to avoid business, financial transactions, or bartering agreements with families. It's not acceptable to borrow from or lend money to families with whom you're working. A parent or family member is in a vulnerable position when you're working with them, and to enter into any type of financial relationship could be construed as you're taking advantage of them. Be sure to check your organization's policy on donating food, money, or clothing, or household items to a family with whom you're working. Some organizations have policies that any donations to a family are done through the organization and not through the individual parent peer support provider, to avoid shifting the role of the PPS from providing support to personally donating to the family. Now let's see how you respond to a potential ethical situation with a parent. Jane? Jane, you may be on mute.
Oh, thank you, Millie. Yes, I have been. So we're going to take the case scenario of Carmen and want you to, in the chat box, provide some input into how you might handle the situation, although we're also going to do it via the poll, but your thoughts. So here we go. You have been providing support to Carmen, an adoptive mother of a youth with depression and fetal alcohol syndrome. As a result of your work together, Carmen was able to access waiver services for her daughter, and she has invited you to go out to dinner with her to celebrate, as well as offered you a small gold bracelet as a token of her appreciation. Can we bring up the poll? So there are many possibilities in responding to this, but based on your organization's policies, your experience, and your thoughts, how would you respond? You see a couple of options there. Accept the bracelet and go to dinner, decline the bracelet but go to dinner, or decline both the bracelet and the dinner. Okay, we got quite a few people responding. We have people saying they would politely decline, some saying, yes, let's go celebrate, others saying we would go, but we would go Dutch. You can see from just the responses we have here that there's no easy answers to all of these. It really is based on, first and foremost, the policies in your organization and how we would encourage everybody to talk with their supervisor before moving forward with any of the options here. So, Millie, what are your thoughts about how this could be handled? We look at most of the responses here are declined both, but we would need to take into consideration, of course, that this mother really wants to show her appreciation. And to dismiss that completely is also not respectful. And then there may be cultural issues here that one would need to consider in terms of, in some cultures, turning down a gift can be considered very, very inappropriate. So what thoughts do you have?
It could actually offend someone in some cultures to turn that down. I think one of the things you definitely want to do is you want to thank her for her thoughtfulness and, explain that your organization doesn't allow you to accept gifts, but you are extremely proud of her hard work on behalf of her child and acknowledge that expression. You can always propose another way to celebrate, such as an announcement at, the next parent group if you're part of a support group. You can thank her and encourage her to write a letter about her positive experience that can be helpful in bringing other people to that type of service, make other people aware about it, increasing awareness even.
Right. Sometimes we've asked people if they really want to help in some way, sometimes a donation to the organization, a letter to the executive director or the board, not so much to promote yourself as a parent support worker, but a letter that could be used to demonstrate how valuable parent peer support work is. And organizations can often use those with legislators, funders, just even communicating with board members to let them know some of the personal successes that are a result of parent peer support. But we've got some other suggestions in the chat box. I love the one about, celebrating and bringing a cake. I think that's a great way to celebrate. Cards and that kind of thing. Congratulating the mother on her success. And I think that's the other important message, is that we really need to turn this back to the family, that it's really their success and not yours. But certainly we recognize and value their appreciation. Any other thoughts on that scenario? We've got a few more typing here.
I like the one, explain I can't accept the bracelet for myself to have it displayed in the office or other culture items that it displays.
That's a wonderful idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you all. These are great, great suggestions. Okay, Millie.
Okay, we were also going to talk about other types of ethical dilemmas that people have faced in working with families. This is another place we could use the chat box.
Yeah, so if you have an example that you would like to kind of share with others in the group, something that pops into your mind, I think one that pops into my mind was a situation where, this was many years ago, where a parent peer support provider was working with a homeless family and unbeknownst to me had them move into their home, all of which demonstrates how much we care about our families and how much we want to give. But clearly that was crossing boundaries, and a situation where that parent peer support provider needed to work with that family to get short-term housing and then long-term housing. So any other people have examples like that, or not necessarily like that, but a situation where you were working with a family that really kind of stopped your clock? We have several people.
Dawn noticed about being invited to birthday parties, and I think the same thing happens with graduations or confirmations, christenings, that type of thing. Personal family events.
Yep. Oh, somebody said she took in somebody's dog. That's another very good example. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because we care so much. That's why these are ethical dilemmas. If we didn't care, it wouldn't be an ethical dilemma, because we would just say, well, it's your problem. Deal with it. So
there's also the issue of purchasing things for families, dinner, food, household items that you see that they need and you just want to be able to support them. Right. There's a way to do that, and there's guidelines around
that. Stephanie has a great one about being asked to be a peer provider in a rural community when it's for a friend. And I think we've all had situations like that. Maybe not a friend, but somebody that their child goes to the same school your child goes to, or they live on your street. All of those can create very, very delicate dilemmas for the peer support provider. And in those instances, it's just critical to talk with your supervisor and come up with a joint decision on how to move forward with that.
I like Ruth stated that depends on the magnitude of the celebration and what you've done to help the family get there. She's gone to a graduation, but not the party, and that's a good balance.
Yeah, that is a good balance.
To go to a graduation, a public celebration, but not attend the personal party afterwards is a great balance of that.
Yeah.
Social media is another one that folks have brought up, where parents or families have asked to friend you on some social media platform. And that right there could cause all kinds of problems, because you're crossing over your personal life, your personal Facebook page with your professional life. And that's not a good idea. You need to draw those boundaries.
And Wendell brings up when a client's boyfriend attempted to physically attack. I've been involved in 2 situations like that, and yeah, that's in some ways is not an ethical dilemma. That is a
safety issue.
Yes, it does need to be reported immediately. Yeah. So these are just great scenarios, and somebody says always no to social media. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
That's the safe way to go.
Yes. Yes. On your personal as well as the professional. Okay, Millie, are we ready to move on?
I think we are. We're going to talk now about interactions in the workplace, some basic guidelines. In general, a parent-peer support provider should adhere to professional boundaries in the workplace. This means time at work should be focused on your role and your responsibilities and working collaboratively with other staff. It also refers to using appropriate language, addressing professionally. Your agency may have a dress code, and you also want to avoid dressing in ways that might make the families with whom you work uncomfortable, such as a suit and tie or dress and heels for a regular home visit. Sharing information from your personal life can help build rapport with your coworkers, but oversharing can lead to negative perceptions of you in a setting where you want to be seen as a professional. Be aware of organizational policies regarding emotional or physical relationships among employees. Some agencies allow staff to date coworkers if they are in equal positions within the organization or work in different divisions. However, some agencies have a policy against workplace dating as a means of avoiding conflict in the office. Conflict can also arise if employees enter into business, financial transactions, or bartering agreements with coworkers, or if money is borrowed or lent between coworkers. It is best to avoid financial relationships of any sort within the office and between coworkers. Equipment and supplies purchased by the organization for your use belong to the organization and should not be used for personal use, such as copying flyers for your child's sports team on your organization's paper and copier. Respect for the workplace extends to your office area as well. It's important to maintain an organized workspace and be cautious in posting family pictures or artwork that could be offensive to others. Refrain from posting anything of a political nature, for example. This extends to sharing non-work related emails, pictures, memes, and other such items. Let's look at a potential ethical situation with a coworker. Jane?
Okay, so you're going out to lunch at a local restaurant with your coworker, Liz. And Liz begins to discuss one of the families involved with your organization and the challenges they've been going through, hoping to brainstorm solutions with you. She is referring to the family by their name, and even though she's speaking softly, the restaurant is very busy with lunchtime crowds. So can we bring up the poll? So how might you handle this situation? Liz is asking for your help. You brainstorm some ideas. Ask her to lower her voice as she's talking or refuse to discuss the family during lunch. Okay, seems like there is...
That's a pretty clear response.
Yeah, total agreement. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So using the family name or any identifying information, even if they're not using the family name, maybe they're just even talking about the child at such and such a school or the family that, you know, is in wraparound or something. In a public non-work environment is breaking confidentiality. Remember, we talked about Mark Zuckerberg and talking about his breaking confidentiality of and sharing information. So this is, you know, as you can see from the responses we have here, absolutely not acceptable. And some of the options then we are possibly saying, hey, Liz, we agreed no talk at lunch today, and then when you get back to the office, take her aside and say, I didn't want to slip up and talk about confidential information in a public place. Can we sit down now and brainstorm about this family? Or you could even make a comment during lunch and say, you know, Liz, this isn't the appropriate place for this discussion. I don't think we're allowed to talk about families in public settings. Let's talk about this later at work. So we have several responses here. Audrey saying, let's set a time when we get back. Without shaming her, remind her that we need to not use names or any other information. As I said, it even talking about schools or talking about neighborhoods or anything like that.
We live in a very small world, and you never know. You could say something that's identifying that you don't even realize is identifying, particularly if you live in rural areas.
For sure, yeah. No shop talk on lunch. I think that's always a good one, actually. Always a good one to follow. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that one? Okay, great. All right. So have you experienced yourself ethical dilemmas in your workplace?
There was an interesting one mentioned last week in another state during a training where one of the parents in the room said that another parent showed her a picture of artwork and said, oh, yes, you know, this person shared this picture of artwork with me, and look how pretty it is. And the parent said, yeah, that's my son's. And it was part of, you know, art therapy or something that was provided in a confidential manner. And, you know, you just never know where that people have connections, and so it's best just not to share that type of information, even in that very broad way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you bring up the point about pictures also, and I think being mindful of what you post in your office and respectful that other people may have different views on different topics. So just being mindful of that in your workplace. And so someone brings up about two coworkers having issues with each other and staying out of it. That's
being assigned to a family that was a personal family friend.
Yeah. And then reassigned after talking with supervisor. Perfect. Way to go. Yep.
It has to be listed as power of attorney for a parent?
Power of attorney.
Was that a coworker?
Was that a coworker or family that you were working with? And how did you handle that? Whoops. I think
It was a family.
It was a family. Oh, my.
Oh, my goodness. Wendell, overhearing coworkers advise each other on how to pad billing hours. Major ethical situation.
Yeah, right.
How did you handle that? In that situation, you're stuck with, betraying confidence of something that you overheard, and the organizational policy and how that could impact funding and licensure and a number of other things.
Right, and there are such things as whistleblower policies. Every nonprofit organization should have one where if somebody reports, because that's illegal, if people are billing for hours that they didn't actually work, that is illegal, could get the organization in serious trouble, and every organization should have a whistleblower policy, that someone who anonymously reports something they are aware of that is illegal, their name is withheld, and so that appropriate action can be taken. Coworkers that are not ethical, and the ED does not address that. Ooh, that's a tough one. So it's already been brought to the attention of the ED?
You also have to look at how it's impacting the families that are being served, because they're considered a vulnerable population when they're receiving services from you. And there are all type of legal issues around that.
Oh, Monica has a great one about coworkers sharing, quote, work issues with families and getting the families involved. That really does cross boundaries, ethical boundaries right there, in that when you're working with a family, it's really about them. It's not you bringing in your issues or your work issues with the family. Yeah. And then the issue is, how do you deal with that? You're aware it's an ethical issue, and how do you deal with it? And again, going to your supervisor around that issue would be really important. Darren says no rumors or gossip. That is a great policy, and that is a policy that, and the one Monica mentioned, where those types of policies should be in a personnel handbook or signed under some kind of hiring agreement where employees do not share information outside of the workplace. And there are several organizations that have policies around discussing other employees within the workplace. And if people would like, Fredla can provide templates for some of those policies, like the whistleblower policy, the maintaining
social media.
Yeah, social media. We can share templates for those policies if people are interested in that.
The one thing I would say about gossip and rumors, you can't control what other people do, but you can control your reaction to it. And you can say, I don't want to hear it, or definitely take the step to not share that with anybody else so that you don't keep it going.
Yeah.
You still have a role in that.
Yeah.
Are we ready to move to the third section?
Yep, let's move on.
Okay, ethical behavior in the community and with partners. One of the roles a parent peer support provider may fill is a liaison to the community and an advocate for family voice and family-driven care with community members. This public role is an important one, as others will notice how you behave and will develop opinions about your organization, other parent professionals, and perhaps family involvement in general. It's your responsibility to promote the value of family involvement as well as the rights of families to have a voice at policy-making tables as partners when it affects their children. Supporting this message and maintaining professional relationships can sometimes lead to uncomfortable situations and ethical concerns. There are basic guidelines to support your work in the communities of the families that you serve. When you're representing your organization, always promote a positive image of your organization and your coworkers. This includes conducting yourself in a professional manner and dressing appropriately for the situation. For example, you would dress differently if you're going to a state-level meeting with policymakers than you would if you were going to your office or a home visit. At meetings, there could be times when your personal opinion on a policy may differ from your organization's position on the issue. When you are representing your organization at a meeting, you have an obligation to support your organization's position and refrain from expressing a personal opinion on the matter. If you encounter a situation when you disagree with a partner organization, look for opportunities outside of the meeting to share information to resolve the issue or handle them through the appropriate channels in accordance with your organization's policies and procedures. If you know in advance that a topic will be discussed that your organization has a strong position that differs from the committee, it is advantageous to communicate with the committee chair in advance that you will be raising some concerns. Always respond respectfully and never use a public meeting as an opportunity to embarrass or blindside a person or organization. Building collaborative relationships within the community is beneficial to your work with families as well. You should develop partnerships with other providers and resources, but also maintain a consistent voice for family-driven care and family voice and choice. Sometimes this will not be popular among other professionals, and you'll need to balance your advocacy with respect for other perspectives and roles. Your relationship should be respectful, transparent, and conducted with integrity. Viewing families as part of the solution rather than the problem sometimes requires a shift in thinking for our system partners, who may approach situations in a deficit-based manner. As a result, the parent peer support provider can be in a difficult position when working in this realm. Perhaps the most important guideline is to clarify your role when working in systems and with partners. Be consistent in your role and completion of tasks, in encouraging family-friendly approaches, scan material for clinical references which are not family-friendly, and emphasize the benefits of family involvement and partnering. Encourage cross-systems partnerships whenever possible. Promote authentic family voice and choice in your interactions with partners and systems. Remember, you're representing the voice of families in your organization, not your own personal interests. Additional guidelines include staying current on topics and trends in your field. You need to be well informed and know where to find information in order to adequately support the families you work with. When working as a parent peer support provider, be sure that you do not intentionally or unintentionally participate in violations of policies or regulations. Do not ask others to violate organizational system, policies, or regulations. If you become aware of violations, seek guidance from your supervisor on how to handle such situations. Now let's see how you respond to a situation in this area.
So we referenced social media earlier on this call, and here's an example. A post is being generated on Facebook that is highly critical of several child-serving agencies with which you collaborate in your role as a parent peer support provider, and you share funding. You actually agree with some of what is being said based on your experience and opinions about children's mental health services. You're tempted to agree with the comments posted on the page, but it would mean agreeing with negative comments about your agency and collaborative partners. Can we bring up the poll? Let's see how people might handle this situation. Engage in the discussion posted online, abstain from responding, tell your supervisor. We have people writing in the chat box, don't respond, keep your thoughts to yourself. All right.
Social media is so tricky.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't do social media.
Alyssa, I don't do social media. This will not happen to me.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Melissa. Yeah. Okay, Ruth brings up a good point. I wouldn't respond, but I would also inform my team, which is, I think, very, very helpful comment, so that perhaps there are team members or the executive director not aware, and they probably should be. But this, Stephanie then brings up, if you tell your supervisor, aren't you mixing personal and professional? Well, I guess it depends upon what you're telling your supervisor. Are you just relating what was posted by somebody, which could reflect poorly on your organization, in which case it would be helpful for your supervisor to be aware. You're not saying that, you're not posting, but you're informing. Okay. Any other thoughts here? Yeah, about take note of the comments. So if the agency needs to do any imaging, responding, or if the comments are valid, addressing the issues. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It might give you an opportunity to bring that up as an issue, saying if this is how we're seen in the public, what do we need to do?
Right, right.
It's interesting, Darren says if we don't do social media, then that would not be keeping up with topics and trends in our field. Yep, that may be true as well. There are some people who have social media or who only interact on social media on the platforms that are there for that purpose. Closed Facebook pages for this learning community, for example, where we share resources back and forth.
Yep, that is true. Okay. So are there other examples where you have had ethical dilemmas working in the community with partners? Something that you may have experienced. We have lots of people typing, so we'll give it a minute. Thanks for all your comments, suggestions. It's great. Okay. Well,
negative talk and venting.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Judgment statements, negative talk about families. Mm-hmm. So that's coming from your partners, right? And it's in a public meeting, or is it on a, in writing? And how then would you deal with those? It sounds like several people have had that experience. I know I have. So how would you deal with that? And some are saying community members making negative comments about you. How do we deal with that as a professional? Okay. Families as tokens. Yep. Yes, we've all had those situations, haven't we?
Using trainings and program materials without referencing the agency or asking to use them.
Yes, we've had that. So Christy says reframing, redirecting, being strength-based, using strength-based language, and reminding them nothing about us without us. Yeah. Partners asking for information about a family that I have in confidentiality. And I tell them I'm not at liberty to talk unless the family gives me permission. That's certainly something we encounter a lot, isn't it? And then you may be perceived as being uncooperative or not a good partner, things like that. That's a common one that people could experience.
Mm-hmm. There are so many of these that are so similar.
Yeah, yeah.
We still have a lot of work to do in the field about the importance of family as partners.
Right. I think in all these situations, one of the best ways we can address it is by maintaining our professional stature, if you will, that, you know, we continue to uphold the value of working with families, family voice. We continue to advocate for the needs of families, and we continue to emphasize the experiences of families and how that is impacting the lives of our children. And I think if we always keep the focus on our families, that's where it's very hard to counter that. And even when they say, well, the families aren't doing what they should be or whatever, I think several of you have said reframing that into strength-based. They're working as hard as they can. They care about their children. They want to do what's right, all those kinds of things. Okay. Christy says sometimes they make the family do what they want them to do rather than what the family wants to do. Mm-hmm. Right, that's called compliance, right? Mm-hmm. Good point.
Or they see the family support provider as their ally in doing so.
Yes, getting the family support partner. Could you make this family do this or that? Right. Totally misunderstanding. Yes. So, well, this is a fantastic conversation. And clearly, everybody has had incredible experiences, many of which are the same.
Mm-hmm. Which led to the development of the workbook.
That's correct. Let's go on to that. So,
sorry, Jen.
What?
Okay. There you go.
So we have just scratched the surface on ethics today, and many thanks to all of you who shared your comments. And as you can see, ethics is not simple, it's messy, and it requires a lot of judgment calls. That being said, being a parent peer support provider is a profession, and it's one that you can be extremely proud of. To say that you are a parent peer support provider is, you know, of the highest degree of respect and admiration. in our field. But if we leave today with two thoughts, the first would be to know your organization's policies. And if there are some policies missing, bring them up to your supervisor or director and say, hey, this has come up for me repeatedly, and maybe our organization needs to sit down and develop a policy. I'm probably not the only one who's encountered this situation with a family, a coworker, or a community partner. And if Fredla can help you with that by providing any templates or anything, please let us know. Second important takeaway, excuse me, is when in doubt, check with your supervisor. There are many of these ethical dilemmas that you do not want to deal with alone. The consequences can be significant for you or your organization. So because of the complexity and the seriousness of these ethical dilemmas and the lack of resources, we are very proud today to release a workbook called Ethics in Parent-Peer Support, Balancing Your Lived Experience and Professional Roles. And Tara, if you could move that over, people could download the ethics workbook right now. You'll see it pop up, and you will, in the files box that just showed up, there is the ethics workbook you can download that we're just describing now, and also a copy of the PowerPoint that we've just gone through. So the workbook was more than 2 years in development and involved more than 20 family members and 14 family-run organizations who piloted sections of the workbook. So it's been field tested. And a big shout out to anyone on our call today who participated in the development of this workbook. The workbook was done under our contract with the University of Maryland National Training and Technical Assistance Center for Children's Behavioral Health and funded under SAMHSA. We're grateful to both SAMHSA and the university for enabling us to develop this tool. As I say, you can download it now. It's also going to be available on Fredla's website, and we're sending out an announcement, actually probably went out just a few minutes ago, with a link to the workbook. So, Millie?
Just a few notes about how to use this workbook. Ethics are a core competency for family-run organizations and parent-peer support providers, and so the workbook is intended to be used as a tool to discuss ethics in training new and seasoned parent-peer support providers. Because each parent-peer support provider and family-run is different, the workbook provides vignettes of common ethical situations that you may encounter, as well as suggested best practices to support families and avoid personal and organizational harm. Organizations may have specific policies related to some of the scenarios presented in the workbook, and states may have laws governing the conduct of parent-peer support providers. For this reason, the resolutions or approaches suggested in this workbook could differ from your organization's approach. The value of this workbook is opening the door for dialogue on these issues. It's recommended that the workbook is used as a professional development tool in the following ways: in a group setting that is conducive to discussion, as part of training for new parent-peer support providers, or sections used as part of group supervision. It's really not intended for an individual parent-peer support provider to review on their own and respond to the scenario questions. The scenarios are based on actual experiences of parent-peer support providers. In the course of discussion, providers may bring up other situations they've experienced, or supervisors may use ethical dilemmas that your organization experienced in the past as this dialogue is opened. They can be used along with or in place of the scenarios that are included in the workbook. Sections 4 through 6 in this workbook contain basic guidelines and suggestions, as well as opportunities to practice skills in a series of scenarios that place the participant in common situations faced by this workforce. Each scenario and the associated questions are followed by a description of the dilemma and possible approaches to resolve the situation. A parent-peer support provider's role is to encourage, support, and work alongside families to support them in elevating their own voice. As parent-peer support providers work through each vignette, they'll be building their capacity and ability to recognize and resolve situations that test their ethics and professional behavior across a variety of situations and settings. As Jane said, you can download this now, and it will also be available on the FREDLA and I think eventually the SNCSA websites. It is a tool that we encourage folks to use and to reach out if you would like further technical assistance in this area.
Mm-hmm. So with that, are there any, we have a few questions that we didn't get to. One is Crystal asked in terms of ethical dilemmas with coworkers about being asked to serve as a job reference. Any thoughts on that one from the group here? Is that
Well, Jane, one of the things that immediately jumps into my mind is that part of the plan for working with the family? Is part of that in finding that parent gainful employment? And if so, what is your role in providing a reference? It can't really be a personal reference. It would have to be more of a professional one. And are they willing to disclose that relationship of having a parent-peer support provider? So that raises more questions that would need to be discussed and thought through.
Right. That's if it's a job reference for a family. I think this was asked in the contents of a job reference for another coworker. Which I think is...
Yeah, there'll be some organizations that have
policies
around that. Yeah.
Right. And if you're asked to provide that reference more as a friend or as a employee of such and such agency, then you may need to inform your supervisor that you've been asked. If you're representing the organization providing a job reference, that's very different from if you're being asked to provide a job reference as a friend. Of course, you would never put it on the organization's letterhead without asking permission to do so. You would never use the organization's letterhead without getting permission to do so, unless it's part of a treatment plan or confidentiality agreements and things like that. But just for a letter that you write, that it would, if it's on the agency letterhead and you're writing it in a capacity of an employee of that organization, you would need to check with your supervisor. There's also, we were talking about attending personal celebrations, birthday parties, graduations, things like that. And Lisa asked about, what about being invited to recovery events and celebrations? Well, in some ways, that's very appropriate because you're celebrating with them on their journey. It's not the difference would be, of course, if then after the celebration of a recovery event, then you're invited back to the house. That's a little bit different. So the setting for it, the reason for it, all those factors need to be taken into consideration. Let's see, are there any other questions that came up? Let's see, we have quite a few on attendance. And Tiara, you are our go-to person on that. I'm wondering if you could unmute yourself and ask people or let people know. She also just posted the survey, so before you get off the call, and don't get off the call now, but when you get off, please take the survey. But lots of questions about certificates of attendance. And
yes, so we will send out an email just confirming your attendance with a couple of links as well, and the email will come from the TA Network's email address.
Okay, thank you. And while Tiara is on the line, kudos to her. She is our one-person tech team which we could not do any of these without. She's amazing, and we're so grateful to her. Thank you, Tiara. Okay. Let's move on. So Fredla's Learning Community Calls are going on hiatus for a few months. We'll be back in August. In the meantime, please let us know if there are topics you would like us to address on the Learning Community Calls. The fact that we're not coming back till August doesn't mean that we're going to be idle in that time. We are getting ready for the Summer Training Institutes in July in Washington, D.C., and we hope to see everyone there. Excuse me, Fredla has been working very hard to ensure that there are many, many family presented, family-focused workshops for family members, family leaders. A sampling includes an institute on fathers where we're spotlighting 2 programs doing amazing work with fathers, a workshop on grandfamilies, the increasing number of families, grandparents who are caring for their grandchildren with significant mental health needs. We're going to be talking about supervision and peer support, family-run organizations 101 for new organizations, a workshop for mid-level managers, a workshop on partnering with juvenile justice and family organizations, and lots more. I also want to call your attention to a very unique learning opportunity that will occur 2 days before the institutes, and that is a pre-institute on leadership, which is being led by Ellen Kagan, who has been doing this for many years. She is remarkable. We have talked with Ellen, and during that 2-day leadership, Fredla will be doing a half-day, a special half-day session on leadership just for family leaders. You have to register separately for the pre-institute, and we hope that you will. We promise it will be life-changing. We also know that Children's Mental Health Awareness Week is coming up very soon, and every one of you will be celebrating. Fredla will be as well, so please look for an email from Fredla on May 10th, which is National Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. The past 2 years we've done videos to celebrate children's mental health awareness, and this year it's not a video. I'm going to leave you guessing in suspense, but it's something very special and inspirational. The focus, as you know, of this year Children's Mental Health Awareness is trauma-informed care, and some of us will be in Washington, D.C. for the national event with the spouses of several governors who have taken on trauma-informed care as their priority. And we are delighted that several family members from all across the country will be there as well to tell their stories. But you can participate live. The event is going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and Fredla will be sending out information on how you can participate on that evening. So in the meantime, also look for additional resources that Fredla will be releasing very, very soon. We've been working on a number of other resources, and we are down to selecting the color of ink on several of them. So be on the lookout. These resources we think are equally as valuable as the ethics workbook. So you see Millie's contact information here as well. And I also want to take time to really thank not just Millie, but the entire Fredla team, Saria Ratliff, Melissa Pearson, and Peggy Nickel, all who work to help us put on these learning community calls. It really does take weeks and weeks of work to pull these PowerPoints and everything together. So hats off to all of them, and as I said, to Tiara, our amazing tech team, all in one person. So with that, thank you to everyone for spending part of your day with us. Have a great rest of the day and be well, and please don't forget to take the survey. We appreciate it greatly. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.